always do on JavaScript Mastery, we're going to start from the complete beginning by creating a new empty folder. We can name it something like GPT-3 underscore, and you can put your name here. In this case, I'm going to say JSM. Once you have your folder, you can then open up an empty Visual Studio Code window and simply drag and drop it there. Once you do that, you can go to View and then Terminal. This is going to open up the integrated Visual Studio Code terminal that's going to allow us to initialize our React application. And let me show you how you can do that. We can start by running npx create-react-app and then simply type /. This is going to initialize a new React application straight inside of the newly created folder. Of course, to run this command, you have to have Node installed. So if you don't already have Node, simply Google Node and download it. That way, you'll be able to run this command if you came across any issues. This process is going to take about a minute, so I'm going to pause this video and I'll be right back. And our app finished initializing. You should be able to see a few files and folders pop up, so let's go ahead and see what that is about. In my case, first thing I have is the Git folder. For some of you, this might be hidden, but completely ignore that because it's not going to be important for the rest of this video. Then we have our node modules, which is going to contain all of the dependencies we're going to install. This is our public folder where we have the index.html we're going to hook our entire React application to. And finally, the most important folder is the source folder. This is where we're going to create our React components. As you can see right now, there is a lot of files and folders that we might not need. So what I usually like to do is completely delete the source folder and then create a new one from scratch. That way, I'll show you how everything is done completely from scratch and we won't have any unused files. Our folder was deleted and we can create a new one by simply typing source or src. Then we can create the most important React file, which is the index.js. Inside of there, we can say import. That's going to be React from React. And only in this file, we also need to import React DOM from React-DOM. This is going to allow us to hook our React application to our index.html. Let me show you how. You can say React DOM .render, and we want to render the application. So we can type app like this as a component, and we want to render it by saying document.getElementById, and that's going to be root. Now, as you can see, this is red right now because our app hasn't been defined. So for now, let's simply say import app from /app. Right now, this file doesn't exist yet, but we're going to create it really soon. And let me also explain the second part. What is this div with an ID of root? Well, if we go into the public folder, index.html, you'll be able to notice that we have a big file here, but if we space this out correctly, remove some of the comments here, some of the comments there, also remove this comment and this no script here, you'll be able to notice that this is nothing more than a most basic HTML file that has just one div with an ID of root. Inside of here, our entire application will go. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying this app component is going to be rendered inside of the div with an ID of root. So now let's create that app. Inside of the source, we can create a new file called app.js. Inside of there, we can run a command called rafce. This is a React functional component. If what I've just done seems like magic to you, you might not have the right extension. So just go ahead and search for ES7 snippets, and then download and install ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets. Once you do that and reload your Visual Studio Code, you should be able to run this command and immediately get a functional component like this one. This is going to simplify and speed up your workflow. Inside of here, for now, we can just create an h1 tag and simply say GPT-3 inside of there. Now, before we go ahead and run our application, we can go to View and Terminal and just install the dependencies that we're going to use. This is a special project video because we're going to use just one single dependency. So you can type npm install, and that's going to be React-icons. And why is that so special? Because everything you're going to see in this video is going to be done from scratch without using extra dependencies. We're going to turn that Figma design into a compelling website without using any dependencies, just by using your React skills. We're going to give this dependency a moment to install, and we'll be right back. There we go. Our dependency installed, and we can simply type npm start to start our application on localhost 3000. And if we've done everything correctly, we should be able to see just one single heading saying GPT-3. Doesn't look like something right now, just a basic white page with nothing on it. But soon enough, this is going to be filled with code, assets, colors, backgrounds, everything. And it's going to look and feel amazing. So to start off, let's create the basic folder and file structure for our entire project. This might seem like a boring process to start with, but this is going to save us so much time later on. So the first thing we can do is create a new folder inside of the source folder called components. Inside of our components, we're going to have just a few components, and these are going to be article. Then also inside of the components folder, we're going to have the brand component. We are also going to have a call to action or a CTA component. We're going to have a feature component. And finally, we're going to have our navigation bar, so we can call it navbar. Now, each one of these components is going to have two different files. The first one is going to be the corresponding component. So inside of the article, that's going to be article.jsx. That article is going to be a functional component, so we can again type RAFCE. For now, it can simply render out the article. Inside of each component folder, we're going to have one more file, and it's going to be called the same as the folder, in this case article, but it's going to be a CSS file. So these are going to be the styles for this specific component. And we can simply import them by saying import.article.css. Great. Now what we can do is we can repeat the process for all of the other components. So I'm going to copy this entire thing and simply do the same thing for the brand. Right here, we can create a new file called brand.jsx, and I'm simply going to paste it here. Now, we just have to change a few things. We can do that by holding the Alt key and then double-clicking wherever we mention the articles. Now, I'm going to rename that to brand. And I'm going to rename the CSS to brand as well. Finally, we have to create a new file called brand.css. Now again, we can repeat this process for our CTA. So let's create a new component called cta.jsx, paste everything. Again, we're going to rename it to CTA, and it's going to be cta.css. Inside of there, we can also create that cta.css file. We can again repeat the same thing for the feature by creating a new feature.jsx component, and right here you can simply paste what we have, rename it to feature, and also feature.css. As I've already mentioned, this process might be a bit boring to start with, but it's going to make our life so much simpler later on. Let's also create one new file. It's going to be called feature.css. And the last component on our list is going to be the navigation bar. So let's create a navbar.jsx. Again, we're going to paste it, rename this to navbar, and change this to navbar.css. And finally, we're going to add the navbar.css file right here. Great. Now we have the files and folders for all of our components. I'm going to close all of our open files by pressing Ctrl and then W a few times, just so we have a clean working environment. And now we can also export all of these components from a single file. Usually, we would have to do something like this. Import article from /components/article, and then one more time article to get to the exact component. And now if we wanted to use all of these components in this file, we'd have to repeat this line for every single component. The second one would be brand, the third one would be CTA, and so on. I think you can see the point. This is getting quite repetitive, and there is a simple fix to that. We can simply go to the components folder and create one new file called index.js. Inside of this file, we can say export in curly braces default as, and we can give the name of our component like article from, that's going to be /article/article. So basically what we're doing is we're exporting the article from this index file. And from this index file, we can also export all of the other components. So this one is going to be brand from brand. Then we can repeat the process. That's going to be CTA from CTA. We're also going to have a feature component like this from the featured folder. And finally, we need our navigation bar. So that's going to be navbar from navbar/navbar. Now with this approach, inside of our app, we can import all of these components in one line, believe it or not. The only thing we have to do is say import in curly braces, article, brand, CTA, and any other component you want from /components, and they're going to be imported automatically. That's great. That's a phenomenal trick that you can from now on use in all of your React applications. But in this case, we won't be importing our components straight inside of our app. The components will be imported inside of our containers. And that's another great tip I can give you. We're going to structure our React application in a few files and folders. We're going to have the components folder for smaller components, and then we're going to create a new folder called containers. This is going to be for our bigger components containing multiple of the components at the same time. You can think about a container like a bigger section of the page. So let's go ahead and repeat the process for our containers. We're going to have quite a few. One is going to be called blog. Then the second one is going to be called features, multiple. Then we're going to have a footer. We're also going to have a header. We're going to have a possibility section like this. And we're going to have a what GPT-3. There we go. So now for all of these containers, we can again create a similar structure where we're going to create a new file called blog.jsx. And we're also going to have the blog.css. There we go. Again, we can simply keep copying and pasting an empty component for now. So let's go ahead to our blog, rename this to blog, and this is going to be blog.css. And I'm going to say it one more time. I know this is getting repetitive, but later on, we'll be able to just switch between the components and start implementing real logic and real design to each one of them. Just bear with me for a few more minutes and we're going to go through it really soon. The second container on our list is going to be the features container. So let's create a features.jsx component, paste it here, and simply change this to features. The CSS file is going to be features.css. So we can create it right here. Then we're going to have our footer. So we can create a footer.jsx. Again, paste it and simply change everything to footer and footer.css. We can again go ahead and add the footer.css file. We can again repeat the same thing for the header. So create a new header.jsx file and header.css, paste our component into the header.jsx, and simply rename everything to header and header. 2 more files remaining. We're going to repeat the same thing for possibility.jsx, paste it here, change everything, and also change the CSS file and add that same CSS file right here. And the last container on our list is whatgpt3.jsx. We can simply paste everything, say whatgpt3, and in here that's going to be whatgpt3.css. So let's go ahead and add it, whatgpt3.css. And with that, we are quite done with all of our files and folders. The only thing we have to do is add this index.js file to export all of the containers as well, so that we can use it straight inside of our React application. Let's go ahead and create a new index.js file inside of the containers right here. And now we can do the same thing. Export default as, that's going to be blog from /blog/blog. Now we can duplicate this a few more times. The second thing on our list is going to be features from the features folder. The third thing is going to be the footer from the footer folder. Then we're going to have the header from the header folder. And we're going to have the possibility from the possibility folder. And the last thing is going to be what GPT-3 section, and that's going to be it. Now we can close all of our files and folders like this. There we go. Collapse everything and just go back inside of our app.js. Inside of here, we can use that trick that I showed you earlier. We can import in curly braces footer, blog. We're going to also import possibility. Then we're going to import features, what GPT-3, and finally the header. All of this is coming from /, and that is containers. Finally, we're going to need a few components. So we're going to import CTA, brand, and also the navbar. These are coming from / components. Using the tricks I showed you earlier, you can see how clean our code looks like. This here would be more than 10 lines, but now we have it in just 2, and it's easily noticeable where we're importing certain things from. Finally, to complete our long setup, we're simply going to make use of all of these components right here. We're going to remove this h1. We're going to have a div that's going to have a class name. So right here, we can add a class name equal to app. Then we're going to have one more div inside of it. And this div is going to have a class name equal to gradient __ bg. Inside of here, we're going to have our navigation bar. So we can say navbar as a self-closing tab. And we're also going to have our header. Below this div, we're going to have our brand to say what our brand is about. Then we're also going to have what GPT-3. We're also going to have the features tab after that. Then we're going to have the possibility tab, or section rather. Then we're going to have the click to action. And finally, a blog section. And the last thing, of course, is going to be the footer. I think that now you should be able to understand what have we been doing so far. We've been setting up the file and folder structure and now used all of these containers and components inside of our app. So now if we go back to the browser, you can notice that everything is structured right here and separated into components. That's all that React is about. Have one single website, be it a single page or a multi-page, but don't have tens of thousands or thousands of lines as you would in a single index HTML file. With React, you can separate everything into smaller components, as we've done right now, and now we can code them out separately to keep our code base readable. Of course,